Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie, and today I'm joined by Gary Gormley, founder of Fab Solutions. Gary, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thanks, Charlie. Nice to be here and love to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again. It's not the first one of these interviews that we've done, but I'm very excited about the topic that we're going to be covering today, and that is contact center agent trends for 2023 and how contact centers can maybe address some of those. But before we get into those trends, just so our viewers can maybe get a sense of your industry expertise, could you tell us a little bit about how you and your company, Fab Solutions, are supporting contact centers?
Yeah, you put me on a platform there with expertise, but I don't know about expertise, but I've certainly got tenure, that's for sure. And sometimes tenure brings that expertise through doing things the wrong way sometimes. So I'm Gary Gormley. So I have two businesses under the umbrella of the Fab Group. And that's Fab Solutions, which is a contact center consultancy, and it helps contact center leaders probably navigate some of the challenges and issues that I used to have when I was working in the operation. I've been in contact centers for about 20-ish years in various different roles, starting right from the phones, leading all the way up to running my own centers. So Fab Solutions was born as a consultancy to help people fix some of those process issues, training, leadership development, and technology. But as I kind of founded that business, and I founded that 4 years ago, it's grown arms and legs, and it's now got the outsourced business that's attached to it. So I actually now run my own contact center at the same time, which means I can sandbox and test things and do new ideas, and see how that kind of whole thing can hang together, supporting clients with various different technologies and solutions and opportunities from inbound, outbound to digital. So trying to piece all that together with the overarching mission for Fab as a group is to change customer perceptions by delivering awesome customer experiences. So that's me and my industry experience. Does that kind of give you a picture?
Yeah, I think you've underlined the expertise as well that I set you up with. But I think it's also great. It kind of shows also that a contact center agent can grow a great career within the
Absolutely.
customer service space. And
Absolutely.
I know this is a topic you're passionate about, but I won't detract from today's main topic, and that is those agent trends. So let's get into those. And what I will say, actually, before we do get into those, is that these come from a RingCentral report conducted at the back end of 2022. And that's collated lots of various industry kind of statistics. And that's in the description box below, so you can check that out too. But yeah, let's get into these trends. And the first one is that agent workloads are increasing in contact centers. Now, this is perhaps a tricky one. But is this a trend that you've noticed, Gary? And kind of how can contact centers start combating those rising workloads?
You know what? It certainly is. I mean, the work doesn't go away, does it? It just builds and builds. And I think, as ever in contact centers, the more channels we introduce into the mix, the more that work is going to increase. So obviously, channels have increased, which means demand has increased across multiple work streams, or multiple channels, if you like. And I've not met a contact center yet that said, "Oh, I introduced web chat into my contact center and all my voice calls dropped so significantly." Now, that would be a dream to have, wouldn't it? But usually when you add in more channels, you add in more demand, or that demand just moves to a slightly different area. So what we have seen is that there's been an increase in workload through the introduction into demand, but also the demand itself has slightly changed. So with the introduction of self-serve, with digitization of the customer journey, you obviously start having customers use different channels that are easier to use and give you that quick transactional fix that you wanted to get sorted without the need to ring somebody. So ultimately, that means the demand that we get into the contact center now is slightly more complex. And in this current environment, not only is it more complex, the customers that we're dealing with are actually a lot more vulnerable at the same time. So we've got an increase in demand, we've got an increase in complexity of demand, and then we've got an increase in the vulnerability of those customers that need help with that demand. So it's a threefold problem, really, that contact centers are probably struggling to meet, and this is probably why we still hear, maybe to this day, we are experiencing high call volumes, or your call is important to us. And I think that's going to It's going to happen, and we need to break the back of it. But how do we support agents to manage that? Well, I think there's a few different ways. I think we have to monitor the vulnerability of the agent. So we've got vulnerable customers. We've also got vulnerable agents, especially in an environment where they're so disparate and they're spread across the country. They might be remote, they might be hybrid, they might also be experiencing their own vulnerability as we go through a cost of living crisis. So I think we have to recognise that, but we have to equip managers at the same time to have those conversations. And again, we have to recognise that managers are also people too. We are human, and that we have our own experiences, we've got our own struggles, and we're then having to balance the needs and wants of a team of anything up to 12, 13, 14 people, depending upon what your spans of control are. So we need to equip managers to have those conversations by supporting them through leadership or training or just having a conversation to check how they are. And then I think the other kind of couple of areas that we need to work on is monitoring that burnout rate of agents. So we look at conformance, we look at adherence. What we don't often look at, or the word that I don't hear used often enough is when we're looking at agent capacity, is the utilization of those agents. So how much of their time are they spent actually doing the work and actually spent on the phone to a customer, on the desktop to an email, on the chat to a web chatter, and actually are they getting as much of a break as they might need, or are we working them flat out? And I think what we need to look at as part of that is the overarching resource model that sits in line with the business, is to say, right, if demand is increasing in multiple areas and the handling time for those is either getting longer or it's getting more complex in terms of conversation and process, then fundamentally your resource model needs to change. And I think we are reluctant sometimes to add headcount in because we see it as an additional cost. But if your headcount and your supply of and your demand of traffic isn't dying down, then that becomes your new demand. And then you have to decide what you want to do as a business to manage the supply needed to resource to that demand so that agents don't feel burnt out, they don't feel stressed, and that customer journey and that customer experience doesn't go through the floor.
Yeah, I think there's lots of really good points there. I mean, as well, for starters, obviously working on the employee experience, stemming the flow of attrition, and I guess that also helps in terms of making sure there are enough agents on the phones to handle a lot of this rising demand. Looking after managers as well, obviously very important so they can get the best out of their employees, and managing occupancy or utilization. I think, it's three very good points there, and I think the old golden standard, I don't know if this still is the case, is making sure occupancy doesn't rise above 85%. Is that what you've kind of see as well?
I tend to flit anywhere between 85 to 90%. If it gets to 90%, I start getting a bit stressed. 85% is probably a nice, healthy green. Bruise and lose, I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there were lots of really great points on that one. So we'll quickly move on now to our next agent trend, and that is agents experiencing difficulties with contact center tools and software. Why do you think this might be happening, and what can contact centers do to maybe ensure more agent-friendly technology implementations?
You know, if you've sat in a contact center and you've sat down with an agent and you've observed how many systems they use, it's absolutely incredible how much they have to navigate whilst listening to a customer, thinking about kind of where to get information and how to start to actually do the job and smile at the same time. So I think they do need a medal for how many systems that they use. And the difficulty comes when we implement technologies is if we do that without a clear plan or without a clear strategy, or if the new CEO or the MD has had systems before and they're all shiny and new and they want to have the same systems in and they just want to put these systems in because that's actually the system that they're used to using. So we need to be careful when we're implementing new technologies and making sure that they tie in with the existing ones and that they actually talk to each other. I think in this digital age now, there's probably not a lot of systems out there that don't integrate with some sort of API. But we need to be really clear about what systems that we've got, how they talk to each other, and how that impacts the agent journey and the agent experience. We talk a lot in contact centers about customer experience. We talk a lot in contact centers about customer journeys. We don't often talk a lot about the agent journey or the agent experience or how well that user interface is laid out and how many screens that people have got. in some instances, I've seen 3 screens for an agent. And that's just too much like the Matrix for me. I think if you start getting into triple numbers with your screens, then there's just too much going on. Unless you're in resource planning where you need something set up like the Matrix, that just becomes a problem. So for me, it's thinking about what that technology strategy needs to be. And I think where we miss a trick often in any systems integration piece or system transformation is not engaging the frontline operational teams early enough in that process and starting to build out what the user requirements are. And what we'll do is we'll sometimes replace something with a as is rather than replacing it with something that fixes a broken process or fixes a broken journey that's going to help improve that overall experience. So I think we need to engage very early on to really understand what the problems are that the frontline are facing that implementing new technology will fix. And what that does is it breeds that engagement plan and it gets that buy-in very early on that this system's going to be amazing. And those people that maybe sat on a system that they've been using for 20 years, that they don't want to lose and they don't want to miss out on, become more advocates because they can see the benefits of doing it and they've actually had input into developing this new system. So I think engagement is a really important one. But I think we need to track back the logistics of how the systems are going to be used and the environment in which they're going to be used at the same time, especially considering the work environment these days is somebody's front room or is somebody's kitchen. So if we do need multiple screens, have they got the space in their home to support that? Or are they trying to cram a laptop and 2 monitors very closely and precariously on some sort of workbench? So I think we have to think about the logistics of what we're asking people to do and the environments that they're working through at the same time. And then ensure that we've just got that right level of support throughout the team that can support them from an IT perspective for when it goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of really great points there. And I think it reminds me actually, a lot of your answer there reminds me of kind of some research Gartner put out, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, saying that 45% of agents keep using old software even after a new implementation. And the Gartner analyst was talking about the importance of a shutdown strategy. But, if you have that engagement, as you say beforehand, the significance of such a strategy is lowered and agents understand the benefits, as you said, of using that technology. And I also think, as you said, also the importance of the environment in which an agent is in is something that maybe we overlook too. So I think lots of really great stuff there too. And that kind of brings us to our last agent trend, and that is a lack of managerial support. I mean, we talked a little bit already about managers, but imagine since the switch to hybrid work, this point is their jobs change, and this made support isn't seemingly there. How do you recommend that contact centers can ensure the necessary agent support from afar?
You know what? The role of the team leader is, I sometimes describe it as thankless, because you don't necessarily get the thanks from the team of the however many people that you're working with, and then sometimes you're not necessarily thanked or appreciated by the seniors above you. So you kind of caught between a rock and a hard place sometimes. So I think we need to recognise that the role of the team leader is a difficult and a challenging one, especially for relatively new leaders that have come out of a COVID environment that might not have had the benefit or the luxury of honing their craft in a face-to-face environment. They're thrust into a remote setting where they're having to think about how they engage a team from a distance, how they train their team virtually and in an environment where they might struggle to get that message, or they might struggle to use the tools in order to help people learn. So I think we have to recognise that team leadership is a particularly challenging role at any point, at least when you're doing that virtually. So I think in doing that, I think we have to really map out what that agent onboarding experience needs to be, and at what point do we drop in the team leader, and when do they get to start to make those connections and build those relationships with the team leaders. So I think things like pre-boarding calls, roles within induction and having a presence in induction, be it virtual or on site, is a key piece. And I think it's worth some consideration to say, right, actually, if we're running more remote teams, can we actually do some of that induction in a physical presence, or is it just too broad spread across the country in order to do that? So how we set those people up initially for success, I think, is important, and the team leader definitely has a role to play in that. And then I'm starting to hear a term around a bias, so an office bias. And this is particularly true of team leaders who have people who work from the office, or might spend more time in the office, so they end up having a bias towards the people in the office. And I think that's only a natural thing, because you start to build those face-to-face connections, and you start probably having those more discrete moments, whereas you don't necessarily get that in a remote setting or in a distance learning setting. So I think we have to consciously work on that bias, and be very aware of it, so that we don't see people feeling like there is a lean towards one or the other. And that is about communication. It's about bringing people together. It's about making sure that they all feel like they're all pulling in the same direction. So having clear structures, having sessions where we're having team meetings and we've got people from home on the TV, maybe we've got the other people in the office, and we've got all cameras on, so that we're all physically seeing each other and connecting with each other, at least box to face, or whatever the phrase is these days. So we start to build those relationships even in a remote environment. And I think training managers in the right way to do that is important, and making sure that the team leaders have the capability to have a conversation virtually, be that positive and or constructive, and that they're not just having the face-to-face conversations when it's about nice fluffy stuff, and then they then move into more difficult conversations, and they might do that virtually, because people tend to pick up on that. So how we structure some of those conversations is really important. And I always liken it to one of my old managers, like, people were in trouble if you got taken to a room these days. So it's like, all right, if you're happy to have the conversation at the desk, then that's great. As soon as you get taken into the room, it's a telling off conversation. So we need to think about that and how that works virtually at the same time. But a lot of it boils down to how we communicate, and how we can communicate in different ways, and maybe do different channels and have different access points, so people can get the help that they need very real time. So Slack channels, WhatsApp channels, Teams channels, all really useful ways of getting emergency SOS conversations very quickly surface to the top, so that people don't feel like they're floundering, or that they don't feel like they're stressing out. And I think the other final point I'd make on that is we just need to recognise that not every conversation or every meeting needs to be a Teams meeting or a Zoom's meeting. There is a such thing as a telephone call, and you can walk and talk around with the phone. It's a mobile phone. So things like maybe having walking one-to-ones where people might not get out of their houses much. If we're having a half an hour conversation about how you're feeling, how your performance is, what career coaching conversation you might want to have, that doesn't necessarily need to be sat down in a laptop in a room talking to each other. It can be out around the phone. Go and stretch your legs. Let's clear the mind. And have a conversation like that. So I think it's just recognising individuals and how they want to be managed, and how we can work with them to get the best outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, kind of the convergence of maybe a Teams or a Zoom or kind of even RingCentral, having that within a contact center platform is particularly valuable in many ways. I mean, through SME, subject matter expert support channels, through a way to channel good customer feedback and grow a culture, and all these excellent things. But as you say, mixing it up a little bit, keeping people on their toes, finding new ways to communicate is very important. So yeah, I think lots of really great stuff within that answer too, Gary. But it kind of makes me think, we've covered three excellent trends from within the report. But it makes me think, obviously you're in contact centers every day. What other trends are you seeing in the agent space at the moment?
I think the agents want to be engaged. That is one of the things that I'm hearing, and that boils back down to that communication piece. Is they want to feel like they're part of something bigger, because they're working so disparately at the moment. I think the trend that I'm seeing is it's harder for contact centers to connect with people and build those meaningful connections and communicate business updates and things that happen in the business and how life is changing. So I think engagement is definitely something that I am hearing people talk about. But I think the biggest trend I'm seeing at the moment, and certainly things that I'm hearing from people that I've recruited internally in my contact center and from people that I'm speaking to outside of that, is that I nearly swore then, it's a very stressful role for the agent at the moment. And conditions and the basics are the things that I'm seeing that are trending at the moment. Is they want to be paid fairly, they want to be valued and respected for the work that they do, and they want that career development to help them increase the salary, get more exposure to different opportunities, and be rewarded fairly for the work that they're doing. So I think the economic environment is definitely putting a squeeze on recruitment, and it's definitely putting a squeeze on attrition. And I've spoken to a number of people who are really struggling to keep hold of people because it's a candidate market now. So people are moving around to different roles for maybe a couple of grand more in terms of pay and stuff. So I think as contact center leaders, we need to make sure that we are anticipating that, and we're either bolstering the employee benefits package, but more importantly, we're treating people fairly, and we're doing right by them so that they get the right level of support, they get the right coaching, they get one-to-ones, we're not pulling training, and we're having the right resource plan that makes their lives a little bit easier. So that's the kind of key thing. I think recruitment and retention are definitely two key themes that are bubbling away very, very rapidly in 2023.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, isn't it? It really is for a contact center manager, as you say, in terms of, you've got an increasing demand, but then the staffing, the ability to kind of keep hold of staff is almost counteracting that in a way. So maintaining the status quo almost is particularly tricky. And I think, lots of great points actually throughout the conversation, Gary. And I'm sure there's lots more people can hear from you. And I know you will also have your kind of own contact center network. Do you want to quickly give that a plug?
Yeah. So what a brilliant segue to next week. Yeah. So next week we have another contact center network panel speakers. So we've got two great speakers that we're talking about learning and development in a remote setting, actually. So how can we help contact center leaders, trainers, people who develop agents or team leaders who have those conversations, have more richer conversations and richer training interventions in a more hybrid or remote world? So how do we build that sense of community from a learning and development point of view to help people excel at their jobs? So that's happening next Thursday, 1 till 2, virtually. So if people want to register or if people want to sign up, drop me a message and I'll share the link.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm sure they can also add you on LinkedIn maybe as well, and they can keep up to date with all that.
I'm always hanging around on LinkedIn, so please do connect with me. I'd love to catch up.
Excellent. Well, I think, that's a great place to end today's conversation. But thank you very much for joining me today, Gary.
Wonderful to see you again, Charlie.
Excellent. And also thank you to everybody for watching. Bye for now.
Take care, folks.